Good evening, it's Tuesday and here we are with another Bible study. Hebrews 11 verse 4, it's page 1209, page 1209, Hebrews 11:4. It would be really useful if you had your Bible open in front of you or on your device. The pages have stopped rustling. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith Abel still speaks, even though he is dead. Cain and Abel is one of the stories of the history, actually one of the stories of history. The first one after Adam and Eve in Genesis 4, Cain the first human born, Abel the first human to die. The first brothers, the first record of offerings to the Lord, the first murder. I just want to focus on these God-breathed words of Hebrews 11 verse 4. They are great words, but slightly like pinning down jelly for the exact meaning. I want to try to interpret the verse in the context of Hebrews first. See Hebrews 10:38. For the two words faith and righteous used together. And 10:38. But my righteous one will live by faith, and I take no pleasure in the one who shrinks back. Faith and works in Hebrews, in the Bible, are not at loggerheads. Real faith works. Real faith does righteous things, right things. So faith is not some airy-fairy feeling. Trusting in God is seen in a righteous life. Keep on doing the righteous things. Faith is resting your whole weight on God, and this affects how I live. Therefore, Abel in chapter 11 is our first example of faith. The first ancestor, the first fruit of faith. Faith in action. Faith demonstrated in right attitudes and right actions. If you look in 11 verse 1, Abel had not seen God with his physical eyes. His parents, Adam and Eve, had, but Abel had not. Abel, verse 1, had seen God, who is invisible. Ahab relied on God for future hope. And in verse 3, Abel knew by faith that God had made the world. He wasn't there. Just a few years previous, Abel, God had created the world. So in verse 4, we just walk through the text. Abel offered the Lord something precious. That's what an offering is, offering a deity something precious. And then we read, why was Abel's offering better than Cain's? By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain. I don't know for sure. Some say it was because it was a blood offering. I don't know. My hunch is that it was not the offering that mattered, but the offerer. It was by faith that Abel brought a more acceptable offering to God than his brother Cain did. Abel's offering pleased God because Abel's heart, Abel's attitude pleased God. And Abel's offering gave evidence that he was a righteous man. The NIV puts it, by faith he was commended as righteous, that his heart loved God. His eyes of faith saw the invisible God as he was offering his sacrifice. And God showed approval of his gifts. God spoke well of his offerings. God was pleased with Abel, and Cain got jealous and killed his brother. And the end of the verse, although Abel is long dead, he still speaks to us by, New Living Translation, by his example of faith. We're talking of him tonight. Though dead, still speaks. So here we have Abel's example of faith. The writer wants to say to us, keep on with Abel's attitude, keep persevering with Abel's actions. What lessons are there here for us? Just simple. Abel had a personal relationship with the Lord. His parents, I think, loved God. But Abel had no formal religious meetings yet. He had no Christian friends. He had no Christian spouse. His was a personal knowledge of God. No public sacrifices, no singing, no reading of the scriptures. Like this lockdown, really. It's you and God. It's my soul and God's being. And it's been good for a while to focus on me and God. How alive is your relationship with God? Abel worshipped one greater than himself. It's a simple point, but you bring an offering to one who is bigger than you. A worshipper says, I am nothing, God is everything. I am creature, God is creator. I am the worshipper, God is the worshipped one. Life revolves around God, not Nigel Graham. The heartbeat of a true Christian is a worshipping, bowing heart. Thirdly, notice that Abel made an offering to God. It cost him. Genesis 4 says the fat portions, offerings and gifts, 11:4 says. Abel's faith cost him stuff. What offering have I made to God of my stuff, my cash? What money have I given back to God? Later in Hebrews 13, we also see that giving praise to God, giving time to others, and giving stuff or cash to others are pleasing sacrifices to God. Hebrews 13:16. Let us offer through Jesus a continual sacrifice of praise to God, proclaiming our allegiance to his name. And don't forget to do good and to share with those in need. These are the sacrifices that please God. Notice, fourthly, that Abel suffered. Abel is dead. Ongoing suffering for being a believer is a big theme in Hebrews. Notice 10:32. Remember those earlier days after you'd received the light, when you endured in a great conflict full of suffering. You were publicly exposed to insult, persecution. At other times you stood side by side with those who were so treated. You suffered. I think it's deliberate that the first example of faith in Hebrews 11 is a believer who suffered the ultimate. Abel, I know, didn't choose to suffer in that sense. It must have been a surprise for him to be murdered by his own brother. But the word death reminds us that the life of faith will always include suffering. This is suffering just because I'm a believer. And finally, Abel won. Abel was the first believer to die, the first soul to go to heaven. Wow, think of that. There he is in heaven. The Trinity is there, the angels are there, and there is Abel's soul. And Abel's been spoken of ever since. And in 1039, Cain shrunk back and was destroyed, whereas Abel had faith and was saved. The example of faith, Abel. If you want the Cain and Abel story, if you want other things to ponder tonight, take a look at Genesis 4, and there is a sermon on the email from a solid church in Philadelphia you may wish to listen to. If you want to ponder the nature of sin, how do we see the power of sin in Cain? You could ponder sin in our families. Do you ever sense and feel and experience being hated by non-Christians in your family? Cain hated his brother. Why do we fall out with our brothers and sisters, our blood brothers and sisters? How do Christians kill the sin of sibling rivalry? How do we as parents think about and deal with the sin of sibling rivalry? And maybe just feel the sadness of Adam and Eve, the sadness of all our families. All of us have conflict. Isn't family fallen? Family will never ever satisfy you. How is family a God to us? And we see in Cain and Abel that family will never satisfy. And then perhaps ponder sin in the church family. Why is there jealousy between Christians? How do I deal with Christians who are holier than me? Listen to the John Piper sermon. Cain was bad, Abel was good, and in 1 John 3, or 4, 3, John says this: do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own actions were evil and his brothers were righteous. Christians can hate each other, hopefully not murder. To finish then, Abel is a model of faith in action. Abel's offering gave evidence that he was a righteous man. Just notice in the text, whose approval do you and I crave? God commended Abel. God spoke well of Abel's offerings. God approved of Abel's faith in action. And so may my affections now be moved this week to cry out to God, "Oh God, I crave your commendation. I crave you to speak well of me, O God. I crave your well done. Help me this week by your Spirit to see you who is invisible, to worship you, to offer gifts to you as Abel did, to suffer for you. By your grace, by faith, may my life speak." Thank you. Have a good week.